When the Jews return to Zion, and a comet rips the sky, and the Holy Roman Empire rises, then you and I must die. From the eternal sea he rises, creating armies on either shore, turning man against his brother, till man exists no more.
I know we've had this conversation before, JD, but I figure now's an opportune time to bring it out again. Do you believe in the devil?
He believes in you.
That's not what I asked. I asked, do you believe in the devil?
I feel like that's a loaded question for me, really. I believe that there is a God, a higher being out there that is our creator.
Do you believe that he has a special interest in us?
I feel like he does. But I also feel like he wants us to explore our free will to its fullest potential, so he lets us make our mistakes.
Do you believe that the devil motivates us to make mistakes?
I do not believe that the devil motivates us. If there is a God and a benign deity, there must also be an evil entity.
I don't believe in the devil, no. I'm pretty agnostic when it comes to these things. But when I was 12 years old, I did. I haven't talked a lot about my religious background on the show. I talk about my Jewish background. But the truth is, for most of my childhood, I was raised a Southern Baptist. You can imagine I got a lot of talk about fire and brimstone and revelations in the end of times and how I was a heathen and going to burn forever in a lake of searing hellfire. I got a lot of that in my ear as a kid. When I was 11 years old and I saw The Omen for the first time, I didn't think it was a movie, JD. I thought it was a documentary. I thought, this is gonna happen. For that reason, the movie scared the shit out of me. These days, I watch The Omen, and I realize that it has no basis in reality, and it doesn't even have any basis in scripture. The Omen does not really pull from the actual biblical text in any way. As movies are prone to, it makes stuff up. But that doesn't mean I still can't appreciate these films.
Because everything in the Bible is just like the internet is true.
Some people believe that, JD. There are biblical literalists out there. A while ago, we did an episode about The Exorcist. Today, we were talking about the also-ran Devil franchise. Though I am a big fan of this first movie, it's not as good as The Exorcist, certainly. It's not as good as Rosemary's Baby. It's a lot better than a lot of the other devil movies out there. The first one is much better than the sequels that would follow. It's almost nostalgic for me, because this is one of the first quote-unquote grown-up horror movies I ever saw. From my understanding, you're nowhere near as passionate about these films as I am.
I'm not. I'm glad I saw it. I feel like as a horror fan I need to see them, but I really have no interest in owning them.
Would you say you have no interest in omening them?
No, because that's stupid. I proclaim to be a pretty stout horror fan, so I believe that I need to see these movies.
Well, the series definitely has its place in genre history.
The perfect marriage of Ambassador Robert Thorne and his wife Catherine was fulfilled by the birth of their son, Damien. And then something terrible happened. And then it happened again. Was it an accident? Was it murder? Was it a coincidence? Or was it an omen?
Look at me, Damien. It's all for you.
There are those who will die for him. There are those who will kill for him. Who is he? What does he want? Where did he come from? And can he be stopped?
What's The Omen about, man? What's the premise of this first film and the subsequent franchise?
The end of the world.
Sort of. What some would refer to as the end times. Basically,
It's about the Antichrist being born.
Robert Thorne is the U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom. His wife has just had a son. They're told has died. In order to not upset the missus, he makes a shady back alley deal with some priest, and they adopt a baby, and they raise it as if it was their own, and that is little Damien. And Damien appears to be a normal child up until his 5th birthday, when his nanny commits suicide in front of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, some more strange deaths follow. Crazy priest comes up to Robert and says, the devil is here. Robert's wife, Catherine, becomes convinced that Damien is not her child. Robert Thorne has to face the facts that his son is the Antichrist, the son of the devil.
The Antichrist, in biblical terms, does not mean the literal Antichrist.
In Revelations, anybody who rejects Jesus Christ as the Savior or as the Son of God is labeled as Antichristo, as Antichrist. More accurately, Damien would be the beast, the central figure in Revelation revelations. Yeah, this movie is responsible almost single-handedly for that misconception that the Antichrist is this figure that's going to emerge and eventually lead the world to damnation, which anybody even mildly famous in politics has been accused of being.
Yeah, I think the current one right now is Donald Trump.
I'm sure Donald Trump's been accused. A lot of people still think Obama's the Antichrist. People thought Ronald Reagan was the Antichrist because each of his names had 6 letters in it.
Oh, Jesus.
But simultaneously, people also thought Gorbachev was the Antichrist. The Catholic Church condemned The Omen, not for its content, but because they saw it as a crass commercialization of religion, which is fair. I don't think this movie's really interested in the ramifications of faith or belief. It's not really about that. It's basically a really good spook show that uses Christian theology as a starting point.
But here's my question. What did they expect to do by saying that they banned it or whatever?
There are certain people, if the church condemns something, they will have nothing to do with it.
Whatever.
You know what this movie is really about to me? It's about parenthood. It's about the anxiety of raising a child. Every parent loves their kid. We hope, anyway. Every parent sees hope and potential and promise in their child. How do the parents of people who grow up to be mass murderers or serial killers or terrorists or Republican senators feel? You really only have so much control over the person your child grows up to be. That's a big part of what makes The Omen interesting. Robert and Catherine, they love little Damien. He's their son. They care about him. And the movie's about Robert slowly coming to the realization that his son is evil. How do you feel about little kids in horror movies? What do you think of that truth?
It depends on how they're handled.
Usually I do not like it. I find the creepy kid who says ominous things to be an incredibly hacky, obnoxious cliche. What scares me about kids has nothing to do with them appearing in a dark hallway and saying something spooky. What scares me about kids are just kids being kids. Really young kids. Damien's 5 in this movie. That's about the right age. They haven't developed empathy yet. They're still learning that other people besides them have needs and feelings. Little sociopaths. The Omen talks about that as well. The scene where they're driving to church and Damien freaks the fuck out and attacks his mom. In this film, it's because he's a little devil child. But in real life, kids do that kind of shit too. Sometimes a kid will grab a handful of hair and pull when the mom falls off the stairway. What does Damien do? He just stares. Is it because he's evil or is it because he's 5?
Both. No, he runs and hides in the bedroom.
Yeah. Damien doesn't know he's evil.
Beg to differ. As the film progresses, he becomes more and more aware. At the end, when the dad is trying to kill him, he goes, "No, Daddy, no." He doesn't say it, he's actually terrified. He says that he's trying to get into his head.
I just see that as a terrified kid going, why is my father trying to kill me?
No, you need to watch it again.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, the actor playing him, that's Harvey Stevens. You know how he got the part? There's a funny story behind this. Richard Donner was auditioning a bunch of kids, and none of them worked for it. When he was auditioning little Harvey Stevens, Harvey ran up to Richard Donner and kicked him in the balls, and he said, "This is the kid." Do you think this movie's creepy?
I don't know. This movie's weird. The movie's not scary, it's just really disturbing.
Would you say that it feels ominous?
I guess if you're really fishing for that pun there.
It has a creepy tone. I think it does cultivate an unnerving, spooky tone. A lot of that is because of the music. Jerry Goldsmith's score feels genuinely sacrilegious. It's become very famous. You see it parodied a lot. And do you know what they're chanting?
I bet they're chanting Hail Satan.
They're chanting Hail Satan, but what Goldsmith did is he took the traditional Catholic mass music and then he inverted it. But he kept that We Drink the Blood, which in this context sounds creepy and weird. This music feels like it could really play at a satanic mass.
Do you also want to know why I think that Damien's fully aware of his abilities?
Why is that?
Who else is doing all the weird deaths?
I go with the theory that in this first movie he has powers, but he doesn't know that he's using them. Things are happening around him and he doesn't really have any control over it because he's 5.
He very blatantly knocks her off the table.
There's debate about that, JD. He's on his tricycle in the room spinning around in circles. Mrs. Baylock opens the door and he comes out. And I like to think of that as he's this kid with all this energy, and when she opens the door, she lets him loose.
You just want to argue with me? How could you have all that power and not know you have it?
Because he's 5! He doesn't know his ABCs!
5. He's had that power for 5 years!
No, he doesn't. He doesn't have any weird powers up until the beginning of the movie.
That they expound upon.
I think there are other elements that make this movie effective in creating a creepy tone. What do you think of that scene where the baboons attack the car?
That's a pretty interesting scene.
Baboons are terrifying animals that'll bite your face off as soon as look at you.
Maybe it's because I'm desensitized after all these years.
You don't think baboons are scary?
I just didn't think the movie was scary in general. It was creepy. To me, it was just more disturbing than anything. The scene with the dogs, it didn't scare me, but it was disturbing.
That's one thing about this movie that does not scare me. My childhood dog was a Rottweiler, so I don't think Rottweilers are scary at all. And then you read the behind-the-scenes story, and the scenes where the dog is supposed to be really aggressive, he was actually just playing, which is exactly how Rottweilers are.
That's just a very disturbing scene to watch his dogs try to rip that guy to shreds. The scene where the professor from TMNT 2, Secret of the Ooze.
Yeah, David Warner's character.
Yeah, David Warner gets decapitated with a sheet of glass.
Okay.
I think that's a very effective kill. It's not scary, it's just disturbing.
What do you think of the death scenes in this movie? Something that would make Richard Donner such a great director for Superman is he believes very much in rooting the material in realism. The original script had more overt supernatural elements, and he removed all of of that. He wanted everything to seem plausible. And the death scenes in this movie walk this very fine line between very shocking and also things that could happen. You occasionally do read stories about people dying these really insane seeming deaths. People falling off of buildings onto fence rows and shit. But somebody getting decapitated during a construction accident, it sure as hell happens. That balance is what makes this movie work the best. It all seems plausible. What do you think about that revelation about Damien's true mother? He was born of a jackal!
Clearly he's the Antichrist. We know he's the son of a jackal. Why do we need to see the bones to know it?
Well, that's the thing. When people saw this movie in 1976, they didn't know.
You know what I think would have made this movie better?
What?
We found out that Damien really was not the Antichrist.
Well, up until that last act, there's that deniability. Up until he pulls back the hair and finds the birthmark, which was a working title for this film. Up until that reveal, there is this possibility that maybe Damien isn't the Antichrist. Maybe everybody's just crazy. What do you think of Gregory Peck?
I mean, he's fine, I guess.
He takes the material seriously. Gregory Peck was a very austere, respected thespian, so he lent a lot of credibility to what was otherwise hokey devil movie. I think Lee Rimnick is great, but when she starts talking about how she doesn't think her son...
I think she gives a good performance.
Yeah. And you brought up David Warner. He's memorable for sure.
He played the right kind of crazy in the movie.
He's seeing these, if you will, omens in the photographs.
Is this the movie that started that trope?
I don't know. Maybe?
Finding the omens in the photographs?
It's certainly something a lot of other films have followed. I love Mrs. Baylock.
She gave an awesome performance. In that very last act, where he's in the house trying to drag Damien out of it, and that woman keeps coming after him.
Yeah, jumps
now
on his...
that did scare me.
Up till that point, there's something just a little off and creepy about her, but you can rationalize it. You plays it like a really sweet woman up until the end when she goes fucking nuts. By the end, do you think the audience is cheering for Gregory Peck to kill his own son? Because that's kind of fucked up, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very somber thing.
The terror of the past is but a taste of the future. What happened before was a hint of the horror to come. The first time was only a warning.
You mustn't attract attention. The day will come when everyone will know who you are, but that day is not yet.
I know who you are. Say it, Mark.
Damien, there are things you don't understand. Read your Bible.
5 deaths, 5 unexplained horrible accidents. We are all in great danger.
Damien, Omen II. The first time was only a warning.
And I have another question. The officer in 2, is that Bishop?
Lance Hinkerson? Yes. Yeah, that is Lance.
That was a young Lance Hinkerson.
That was a young Lance.
A really young Lance Hinkerson, so it was really
indeed.
hard to tell it was him.
Because
he's always been old.
His voice is pretty distinctive. Gravelly voice of his.
Ever since the 80s, he's always been old.
Yes, that's true.
I've never seen him in a movie before the 80s.
He didn't start acting until his 30s, so he was already a mature adult by the time. The thing with Lance, he learned to read by reading scripts.
Really?
He has a pretty interesting life, that guy. Obviously, The Omen from 76 was a big hit. Along with The Antichrist, a franchise had been born. Harvey Bernhardt was the producer of all of these movies, but he was a big proponent of The Omen. This was his baby. He actually wrote the story outline for the second film. Damian Omen II. Damien gets top billing in the title, which is actually a little misleading because he's not...
Damien!
It's all for you, Damien.
No. All for you, Damien was the first one.
Yeah.
Damien! And then he blows her up.
Character we didn't mention in the first one, this character of Bugenhagen, religious scholar and archaeologist who gives Richard Thorne the knives, the 7 knives. The first knife will kill his body, all the other knives will kill his soul.
Their powers differ from movie to movie.
There is some inconsistency, yes. Damien Omen II begins with Bugenhagen discovering definitive, unrefutable proof that Damien Thorne is the Antichrist. It's kind of a silly thing. He discovers a wall that has Damien's face painted on it.
Yeah, really.
Then Bugenhagen is killed in a cave-in. And we jump forward 7 years.
Yeah.
Damien's now a teenager. He's coming of age. And he's now living with Richard Thorne, who is Robert's previously unmentioned brother. And he's living in America. He's going to school. And this movie is about Damien becoming aware of and eventually accepting his demonic heritage.
To combat what you said a minute ago, I don't think she was teaching him about his demonic heritage, but I think she was trying to culture him with his abilities.
Maybe. Obviously, she was sent by whatever the satanic conspiracy is.
So, hey, Damien, this priest is really getting on you, so why don't we...
I don't really like the idea that Damien is directly causing these things to happen. It's creepier if they just happen anyway.
Well, I didn't say I liked the idea.
Part 2, we see Damien actually does have psychic powers. He stares at a kid who's bullying him and he has a seizure. And later, he gives his adopted brother an aneurysm. This movie had so much potential. As far as Damien knows, he's a normal 12-year-old kid. Then he finds out, midway through the movie, that he is the Antichrist, that he's going to bring about the end of the world. That would fuck up anybody. Kind of feel bad for little Damien.
I don't think it's as one-sided as that, because there's Aunt Miriam, or whatever her name is.
The bitchy aunt who dies first.
She talk shit about him. Miraculously, she dies.
Raven flies into her bedroom and that's...
squawks at her. She dies of a heart attack.
Yeah.
To me, what's implied there is that the Raven is telepathically linked to Damien. For the most part, you don't see him perform the killing, but we know that it's him doing it.
He might think to himself, man, I wish that bitch would die, but he doesn't know what power that has.
He's got the power of Satan. He's not going to learn it all in 7 years. Damien is a mutant. By your logic, Damien is a mutant.
I guess so.
Because he's just now coming into his awareness of his abilities. You see him do it in points of extreme stress for him, so therefore, then he is a mutant and he should be part of the Brotherhood of Mutants.
Anyway, this movie would have been more compelling if it played up the Strum and Draw contrast what would normally be typical adolescent angst with him suddenly becoming aware that he has this evil power. By the end, he's accepted that he is the son of the devil and that he's going to bring about the end of the world. And I wish we had gotten more of that. Why he comes to that decision.
Yeah, see, that's the problem I have with the second one. It's just anticlimactic.
By the end, he accepts that he has these powers. It happens off screen.
Yeah.
Richard Thorne has essentially got the same character arc as his brother in the first one. People trying to convince him his son's the devil, and him going, well, this is ridiculous. More evidence mounts until he can't ignore it anymore, and he realizes, I've got to kill my own boy. And the first one, there was this question, oh, well, maybe Damien isn't the Antichrist. By this one, we know Damien is the Antichrist. It's a less interesting journey.
Mm-hmm.
The kills are definitely more elaborate.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the more grisly violence?
You know me, I love a good violent movie.
I've got no problem with violence in films. The first one, there was this balance between plausibility and possible supernatural stuff happening. In this one, that goes out the window.
Yeah.
Crazy shit is happening. Like, woman gets her eyes pecked out by the Raven and then gets hit by a 18-wheeler. Or do you remember the guy in the elevator? That's probably the most extended death scene in the movie.
I don't remember the guy in the elevator.
The scientist discovers that Damien has jackal DNA.
Oh, yeah.
And the elevator stops and the cord drops through the elevator and chops him in half.
But I kind of like that death, though. That was a cool death.
Well, from a special effects angle, yeah, it's cool. But I do have a little bit of a problem with this movie where it seems to introduce characters just to kill them off.
Yeah.
Like the guy who looks at a blood sample of Damien and sees that he has jackal DNA, then immediately dies in the next scene. This movie is sloppily written. What do you think of some of the acting in this? You like William Holden as Richard Thorne?
I don't care about dude.
What about the kid playing Damien, Jonathan Scott Taylor?
He actually did a pretty good job.
Yeah, he is probably one of my favorite things about the film. He gives a good performance.
He doesn't seem too stiff and robotic.
Lee Grant plays Damien's foster mom. She seems normal throughout until the very last scene.
Yeah, stabs the dad.
And we find out that she's one of the Satanists. Apparently Lee Grant was a big fan of the first movie and insisted on being in this one.
Damien!
Yeah, then he blows her the fuck up. And that's Damien crossing the moral event horizon. He's now killing people who care for him.
Yeah.
We should have been more in his head. It is clear that it was a rush sequel. Music is just as good. Jerry Goldsmith would write an original score for the first 3 movies. Each one is different. Middle-of-the-road horror programmer, but it's certainly not a terrible film.
In 1976, the birth of evil was foretold in The Omen. In 1978, a terrifying prophecy was fulfilled in Damian Omen II. And now, you will witness the ultimate challenge to the future of mankind as the trinity of living terror is completed in the final conflict. Damian Thorne is 32, attractive, brilliant, charismatic. To the modern world, he brings a purpose, a vision, a destiny. He's one step away from the most important position on Earth. The power of evil is no longer in the hands of a child. Heed the warning. Prepare for the final conflict, the concluding chapter of the Omen trilogy.
Though some would say it is better than the conclusion to the trilogy, 1981's Omen III, The Final Conflict, which was released theatrically as just The Final Conflict. The producer was really determined to see the story through to the end, which is a nice bit of conviction, isn't it?
Yeah.
First movie promises the little kid's going to grow up to be the Antichrist. It's cool to see him actually do it. By the time of The Omen III, which screws around with the timeline a little bit, Damien is an adult. He's 33. He's the same age Christ was when he was crucified.
No, I like this one.
You like this one more than the previous two?
I don't know if I like it more than the first one. This one gives you an idea of how the Antichrist would operate under the radar, so to speak. The Antichrist is not going to go and start killing off world officials single-handedly. He's going to start off small and work his way up.
Oh yeah, he's not going to do anything to
out himself. Finds out that Christ has been reborn, decides to go through and kill all the kids. Damn, he's not fucking around. I guess I should say that this is my favorite version of Damien.
There's a prophecy that Christ will be reborn. Damien now is in a seat of power. He's the ambassador to the UK. And meanwhile, he meets a female reporter and they have something like a love story. And who plays Damien?
Merlin.
The dude from Jurassic Park.
Yeah. Hold on. Dr. Grant.
Dr. Alan Grant.
Yes.
Sam Neill, with 2 L's. It's the actor. This is a movie that has some flaws, but Sam Neill is great. He is so fucking creepy in this. He has these monologues where he's yelling at a statue of Christ, whom he never calls Jesus or Christ. He always derisively refers to him as the Nazarene, very condescendingly. He genuinely believes that his intentions are better for mankind. God restrains mankind. The devil gives humanity what they want. It's creepy because he really does believe what he's doing. He's not a cartoonish supervillain.
Now, you want to know what made me think this movie jumped the shark?
What's the shark jumping moment in Omen 3?
The end. The full implications of the other half of the religious spectrum are still rather ambiguous. Well, if there's a devil, then there has to be...
In 70s Satan movies, the devil has power, but God seemingly doesn't.
All of a sudden, at the end of Omen 3, Jesus Christ himself appears to Damien and shines his holy light upon him to destroy him.
If you read Revelations, you would know that Christ will return as an adult. He won't be reborn as a baby. Damien should fucking know that shit. The entire second half of this movie where he's trying to kill the Christ child, he should know better.
But he can't go around killing adult men.
Represents a lack of research on the screenwriter's part. Speaking of a lack of research on the screenwriter's part, in the first movie they clearly say the 7 daggers of Megiddo. One will kill him, but all 7 are needed to destroy his soul. At the end of this movie, Damien's quote-unquote love interest stabs him with the 1 dagger, and it kills him. I don't know if they were intentionally trying to leave the door open maybe for another one by doing that.
There's no explanation for it.
The movie forgot its own mythology, and that makes me mad.
She didn't even kill him.
Well,
she just wounded him.
Jesus' savior rays that killed him?
Yeah, Jesus came in and Kamehameha Damien in the face.
Great moment from Sam Neill is even when Damien's dying, he says to the reappeared Christ, he says, "You've won nothing." Even up until the end, he is defiant. In some ways, it reels back the gore a little bit from the previous one.
Yeah.
A Rottweiler appears and convinces the current UK ambassador to blow his brains out in a pretty cool sequence.
Yeah.
Some of them don't work for me. One of the holy monks that are trying to kill Damien is mauled to death by hunting dogs, by adorable hunting dogs, by fluffy-eared, bushy-tailed hunting dogs. What do you feel about that? The infant death montage.
The part in the movie that disturbed me was when they implanted the vision in that woman's head that her baby had turned into this demon husk-looking thing.
Then she kills it with a hot iron. That scene doesn't work for me. Demonic baby puppet looks cheesy.
Oh, I think it looks cheesy too. It's just the thought of a woman under brain control searing her own baby's face with a hot iron.
Yeah, there's no doubt this movie goes to some fucked up place. Mass infanticide is one of the main plot threads in this movie.
Yeah, it's definitely the most fucked up of the 3.
The main character is indirectly or directly responsible for the death of hundreds of babies. Yeah, pretty fucked up. Agreed. Now, what do you think of Lisa Harrow as Kate, Damien's girlfriend?
I like her a little bit. She's definitely got more personality than the previous 2 female leads.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far. Fine actress, just nothing wrong. Sam Neill and the actress have good chemistry, but there's one scene that makes me uncomfortable in a way that I don't know it was intended.
Oh.
The butt rape scene. Yeah!
She's like, you want to know if I'm the Antichrist? Here's your answer.
Not quite like that. That was a different sort of disturbing than what the rest of the movie is.
She still sleeps in the bed and goes looking for him in the morning. You know,
a guy butt rapes you, that would be the end of the relationship for most people, I think. Because it's unambiguously a rape. She's against this happening, and he does it anyway. Part of that plot that is effective is her son goes over to the dark side. Damien convinces her own son that to love him.
And then he kills him.
The priest goes to stab Damien, and he uses the kid as a shield.
Yeah.
There are some cool scenes. This movie really does try to make it into an epic story. Damien flies down on a helicopter into this valley that's full of Satanists that do his bidding for him.
Yeah.
The quote-unquote epic conclusion to the story. It disappoints in some ways. Maybe a little smoother of the movie than the previous one.
Yeah.
It was a story audiences would never forget about a boy with an evil so great who became a man destined to rule the world. Damien Thorne is dead, but his prophecy is about to be reborn. Behind her sweet smile lies a dangerous secret. A reign of darkness is about to be unleashed. Omen IV, The Awakening. The nightmare has just begun.
Even though Damien dies at the end of the final conflict, right there in the fucking title, this conflict here, it's final. Sometimes franchises are even more immortal than demonic offspring. The year was 1991. Fox had just launched their television channel. They were trying to find a way to draw in viewers. And somebody had the bright idea, hey, we're owned by Fox. Fox has a whole library of recognizable film titles. Let's do some TV movie sequels to some of their biggest hits. Why not The Omen? And nobody said, well, isn't that an entire franchise built around violent death? That doesn't really work for TV. And nobody said, but didn't Damien die in the last one? one? Instead, they said, yeah, that's a great idea, which is how we got Omen IV, The Awakening, which aired on the Fox network on May 20th, 1991. Jesus returned, but that has no effect on this movie, so I don't know. Maybe Jesus showed up, killed Damien, and said, yeah, my work here's done. The congressman and his wife can't conceive a kid, so they adopt a little girl. Delia is what they name her. And as Delia gets older, the mother, Karen is the character's name, gets concerned by some of her daughter's behavior. And after Karen herself becomes pregnant, she gets especially disturbed by Delia's behavior. After investigating some more, she comes to the conclusion that her adopted daughter may be the offspring of Damian Thorne, the Antichrist. She may be the second generation of Antichrist. Now, you've seen this one, right?
Yeah.
Years ago. And it's not a film that requires revisiting. If you thought Omen 3 was hokey in spots, ooh boy, get a load of this. This movie has no subtlety at all. The little girl is obviously evil from the beginning. She acts like a little sociopath. By making the child obviously evil, it changes the context of the story. In the first one, the whole film was built upon, maybe Damien isn't the devil, maybe this is just typical parental anxieties. By making the kid obviously evil, now the parents' concerns are totally founded. Do you remember how many inverted crosses are in this movie? Every goddamn minute there's a fucking inverted cross. And it gets to the point where it becomes funny. And it's especially silly, because if you actually know anything about Catholicism, you know that the inverted cross is not actually a demonic symbol. It's how St. Peter was crucified. The thing I really hate about this one is it introduces New Age concept. Do you remember this? Delia's nanny is called Jo, and she's super into New Age stuff. She has a collection of crystals, and the devil child makes the crystals turn black. She has a friend who can see auras, and he says, oh, that girl's aura is really creepy. The funniest scene is she takes Delia to a psychic fair where she gets her aura photographed. They were trying to make the movie seem more credible by tying it to a whole bunch of New Age goobly-gook. Certainly did not help that case.
My favorite scene in the movie, I guess is what I should say. Probably the only good scene in the movie, and I think you hate it anyway. When the girl pushes the nanny out the window.
Rottweiler jumps up and knocks her out the window.
Okay, and then she falls and lands on the merry-go-round, and then the merry-go-round is spinning.
I find the death scenes in this movie to be super lame, and some of it, you can't get away with that same level of gore on TV, at least not in 1991 you couldn't. Most of the death scenes are pretty silly. The thing that makes that scene goofy is not so much that she gets knocked out the window and lands on the roundabout or merry-go-round, whatever you want to call it. It's that they play a little carnival music afterwards. Michael Lerner, who has been in hundreds of things, he plays the detective in this, a good actor, but his death scene is silly where he wanders into a construction site and gets struck by a wrecking ball.
Yeah.
Amid satanic visions. The acting's terrible in this movie. Faye Grant plays the mom, and she gives a monstrously bad performance. And the way they tie this one into the previous three films is really heavy-handed. There's a scene where a doctor says, oh yeah, we impregnated Delia's mother with Damian Thorne's DNA. It's tagged on. They shoved that in there to say, yeah, it's a real Omen movie. And do you remember the twist ending?
Oh, yeah. Delia's sitting there holding Damian Thorne, born again.
The whole movie's been a big misdirect. Delia's not the Antichrist. Karen's actual biological child is. Damien has his birthmark underneath his scalp, where most people wouldn't look. The new baby has his birthmark on the palm of his hand, which I would think would be a little harder to hide. Maybe I'm being too hard on it because it is a cheapy cash-in sequel. It's a bad movie.
Yeah, it was not as bad as the next film.
Damien! Look at me, Damien!
It's all for you. What's wrong, sweetie? It's just a church, that's all.
Hello, Damien. I'm here to protect you.
There's something about Damien.
I was at the hospital the night your son was born. What do you know about my son? Everything. From the eternal sea he rises, creating armies on either shore, turning man against his brother, till man exists no more. Your son, the son of the devil.
The remake of The Omen may be the only movie that was created solely to capitalize on a release date. 2006, they said, hey, we're going to remake The Omen. This movie was rushed into production so they could get it out on June 6, 2006. Yeah, see what they did there? I love The Omen, but I don't think of it as this untouchable classic. A remake could have been interesting. We live in a pretty a-religious time. There are people out there who are hardcore religious, but most people aren't. What would an agnostic Omen movie look like? You could do something new with that, but they didn't do that.
We're going to do a remake. Why do a shot-for-shot remake?
This is more or less a scene-for-scene remake.
People made fun of the Carrie remake for being a shot-for-shot remake.
You mean the most recent one?
Yeah.
It wasn't.
It wasn't.
This movie follows the exact same story beats. Robert Thorne's son dies, switches the baby with a living one, the nanny kills herself, the priest warns him, the priest gets impaled, black dog shows up, nanny moves in, mom gets worried, pregnancy is terminated, photographer, the monk that was burned in the fire, the scene in the cemetery, it all happens the exact same way.
They use really cheap, unnecessary CGI.
The death scenes are gorier. It feels like they're trying to one-up the original in a way that's irritating.
The remake is pure melancholy. Very somber the whole movie. It doesn't feel like any character has ever had an upbeat moment in the whole movie.
That's fair. And part of that has to do with how they shot it. I'm a big fan of flashy photography in a movie. Prominent, artistically framed shot happens after a build-up or every once in a while. It's striking. When the whole movie is shot like a car commercial, it becomes annoying. Every moment in this film is framed for maximum flashiness. Not every scene needs to be a photograph. Let's talk about some of the ways they change the kills. Instead of the priest getting impaled with a lightning rod, the rod falls through a stained glass window, so he gets hit by the glass and the rod. When the photographer gets decapitated, Hammer knocks a screw loose from a sign, which then swings around and cuts his head off.
Yeah.
Which is right out of fucking Final Destination.
Mm-hmm.
The changes that are made are pretty trivial. Instead of Damien being on a tricycle when he knocks his mom off the railing, he's on a razor scooter. They don't go to a drive-through zoo with baboons. They go to a regular zoo where a gorilla freaks out and breaks the glass. And they add this subplot about the Vatican. Very first scene in the movie where a priest presents a slideshow to the Pope that shows real-life disasters, September 11th terrorist attacks in the World Trade Center, or the flooding of New Orleans during Katrina, and says these are signs of the end times. That's tasteless. The movie ends during a funeral for Robert Thorne. Pope dies at the same time. Who gives a shit? It doesn't add anything to the movie. And it also adds these stupid nightmare scenes. You remember those?
Mm-mm.
They're basically jump scares. Man, if there's anything this movie didn't need, Julia Stiles plays the Lee Remnick part, and she's so miscast in this. I like Julia Stiles.
The same goes for Liev Schreiber.
He seems bored. He doesn't seem to have any investment in the story. I think it was just a paycheck for him.
Yeah, he was. I'm just getting paid to do this.
David Thewlis plays David Warner part, and he's doing a straight-up impersonation of David Warner. The worst casting is the kid playing Damien. Famous Davy Fitzpatrick. This kid is intentionally acting creepy.
Yeah.
But I do like one actor in the movie, and I think you know the one I'm talking about. Mia Farrow as Mrs. Baylock. But neat joke, oh hey, she was Rosemary, now she's Damien's nanny. She seems to actually have a bead on the material, which nobody else seems to have. This is one of those remakes that just make you ask, what was the damn point?
Right.
All during the picture, there was strange things happening. It was an aura of not being welcome. I really sincerely believe that the devil didn't want the picture to be made.
Now they're talking about doing a prequel, which presumably will just be 2 hours of the devil fucking a jackal. It's going to be called The First Omen. They have a writer and a director. It's set for a 2019 release date. The Omen seems like a weird story to prequelize. When your main character is 5, what's there to tell before that? Presumably it will be about the satanic cult orchestrating the birth of Damien. I don't really think there's any more story to tell with the Omen. When they killed Damien in part 3, that was the end of the story.
Right.
Maybe if you want to do a new version of the second one that explores his teenage development some more, that could be interesting. But then again, they did do that recently, didn't they?
Yeah.
There have been 2 attempts, actually, to make a TV show out of The Omen. The first one was a pilot movie that aired in 1995 called The Omen, and the film actually had nothing to do with the series. It's about this amorphous CGI cloud that floats into people, possesses them, and makes them do evil things. And it's being trailed by a detective played by William Sadler, otherwise known as the Reaper from Bill and Ted. It aired once, nobody bothered recording it, and I didn't think I'd ever see this thing, but apparently somebody recorded it because it's up on YouTube now, and I watched it, and it's okay. It feels like an X-Files ripoff. But more recently, earlier this year, A&E aired a series called Damien. Now, A&E had a hit with Bates Motel, which is a teenage prequel to Psycho. I don't like that show. Damien was the same thought process. Let's do a teenage quasi-sequel continuation of another famous horror movie. I'll admit, I only watched the first 2 episodes of Damien. Recently got canceled, so there will not be a season 2 of this.
Oh, and thank God.
I found it to be pretty melodramatic. You said you watched the first episode, right?
I turned it on a second later and watched it until I fell asleep.
Okay, so did you see the scene where his girlfriend gets sucked into a sinkhole?
Totally.
Yeah, that was terrible. Do you remember how the first episode ends with him realizing the spooky woman is in all these photographs?
Yeah.
Melodramatic and overwrought, and I found it to be pretty silly. Which is a bummer. It's basically could have been what I just suggested. Let's explore Damien's adolescence, though he's in his 20s in this, so the timeline does not add up. By all accounts, the show did not improve after the first 2 episodes. Oh, and before we end, there were books, too. Gordon McGill wrote 2 books, Omen IV, Armageddon 2000, published in 1983, and then Omen V, The Abomination, published in 85. And these were direct continuations of Part 3. The premise of these books is that the woman that Damien sodomized becomes pregnant pregnant with a butt baby. She gives anal birth to a child who is the abomination, who's the real Antichrist. And he, in the year 2000, as the title suggests, brings about a nuclear Armageddon, succeeds where Damien fails by bringing about the end of the world. And the fifth book is set in a post-apocalyptic area, and it's about the last battle between good and evil. I haven't read those books, though, so they may be total shit. You would not say you're a fan of the series.
I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm not a fan either.
You find the films interesting, but you're not passionate about them.
Right.
Like I said, that first one I saw as a kid scared the shit out of me, really spooked me.
Well, that's why you shouldn't teach the Bible to your kids.
You shouldn't! That first movie I still think is pretty good. And the sequels are of varying quality. Oh, you're telling me to wrap it up, huh?
Yeah.
You want the end of the world to come sooner.
No, I just want the end of this podcast to come sooner.
Some thanks are in order. Juan, thank you for liking the show on our Facebook and liking the episodes. Rob Mendez, thanks for the kind comments. Really appreciate it. And thanks to all our fans and listeners everywhere. You may email us at bangersandmash88@yahoo.com. Contact us on Facebook at the Facebook page, www.facebook.com/thebangersandmashshow. JD, before we get off mic, there's this thing here on my head. I really want you to look at this. It's going weird.
Oh, yeah, it's 3 9s in a circle.
Oh, 3 9s?
Yeah.
Oh, nothing to be worried about then. Oh, we didn't talk about Damien on South Park. Damn, missed opportunity.